Emma Carter stood outside the glowing entrance of Bellamy's restaurant, clutching a gift bag tightly against her chest, while cold evening wind brushed across her face. Through the giant glass windows, she could already see her family laughing inside beneath sparkling chandeliers. Expensive dresses, polished suits, golden decorations, everything about the celebration screamed luxury. And then there was Emma, wearing a simple navy blue dress she had owned for 3 years. She looked down at the handmade scrapbook in her bag and suddenly felt foolish for bringing it. For weeks, she had spent every spare moment creating it for her mother's 60th birthday. She had collected old photographs, handwritten memories, and little notes from relatives. Every page held love and effort. But standing outside that elegant restaurant, Emma already knew her gift would look painfully small beside the designer jewelry and expensive vacations her siblings had probably purchased. Taking a deep breath, she walked inside. Emma finally made it. Her younger sister Vanessa announced loudly the moment she spotted her. "I was starting to think you couldn't afford gas." Several relatives chuckled quietly. Emma forced a polite smile. "Happy birthday, Mom." Her mother barely looked up from her champagne glass. "You're late." "It's only been 5 minutes," Emma replied softly. Jason, her older brother, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. Time works differently for people without real careers. More laughter spread across the table. Emma felt heat rise into her cheeks, but stayed silent. She had learned years ago that defending herself only encouraged them more. She worked as a caregiver at a retirement center, helping elderly residents eat, bathe, and manage medications. The work was exhausting and emotional, but Emma loved it deeply. Unfortunately, her family treated her job like a personal embarrassment. Vanessa adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist dramatically. "So, Emma, are you still changing diapers for old people?" "It's called caregiving," Emma answered quietly. Jason laughed, same thing. Even their mother smiled at the joke. Emma swallowed hard and sat down at the far end of the table. Nobody had saved her a proper seat, so she squeezed awkwardly beside a decorative plant near the corner. Across the room, waiters carried trays filled with expensive seafood and wine. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath the lights, while soft piano music floated through the restaurant. Everything felt beautiful except the way her family treated her. Halfway through dinner, gifts were placed on the table. Vanessa proudly handed over an envelope containing tickets for a luxury cruise. Jason presented an expensive gold necklace that made several relatives gasp in admiration. Then all eyes turned toward Emma. "Well," Vanessa asked impatiently, "did you bring something besides emotional support?" A few cousins snickered. Emma carefully placed the scrapbook in front of her mother. "I made this," she said nervously. "It has pictures and memories from our family over the years." For a brief moment, silence filled the table. Then Vanessa burst into laughter. "Oh my God," she said between giggles. "It looks like a middle school art project." Jason flipped through a few pages carelessly. "You actually spent time making this." "It's thoughtful," Emma said quietly. "It's cheap," Vanessa corrected. Their mother sighed heavily. "Emma, your heart means well, but honestly, at your age, handmade gifts feel childish." The words struck harder than Emma expected. She lowered her eyes, trying desperately not to cry in front of everyone. Around the table, relatives exchanged uncomfortable looks, but nobody defended her. Nobody ever did. As humiliation burned inside her chest, Emma noticed an elderly woman sitting quietly near the end of the table beside her aunt. The woman wore an elegant dark green suit, pearl earrings, and carried herself with calm dignity. Emma recognized her vaguely as one of her late grandmother's old friends. Unlike everyone else, the woman wasn't laughing. She was watching, carefully, intently. Every cruel joke, every mocking comment, every dismissive glance. The woman observed it all in complete silence. When dinner continued, Vanessa leaned closer and whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "Honestly, Emma's life is depressing. No husband, no money, no ambition. I'd die of embarrassment." Jason smirked. "At least Mom has 2 successful children." The table erupted in laughter again. Emma stared down at her untouched food, blinking rapidly to stop the tears gathering in her eyes. And across the table, the elderly woman slowly set down her fork. Her expression had changed completely. Because while the Carter family mocked Emma like she was worthless, Grandma Rose's best friend was listening to every single word. Emma barely slept after the birthday dinner. Every cruel comment replayed endlessly in her mind like a broken recording. Vanessa's laughter, Jason's smug jokes, her mother calling the scrapbook childish in front of everyone. By morning, the humiliation still sat heavily in her chest. She arrived early at the retirement center, hoping work would distract her. The quiet halls smelled faintly of coffee and lavender cleaner as residents slowly began waking for breakfast. And like her family, the people here appreciated kindness. They thanked her for simple things, brushing their hair, bringing extra blankets, listening to old stories they had already told 10 times before. "Good morning, sweetheart," Mr. Delaney said warmly as Emma helped adjust his wheelchair. "You look tired today." "I'm okay," Emma replied with a small smile. But she wasn't. Around noon, her phone buzzed inside her pocket. She almost ignored the unknown number, but something made her answer. Emma Carter speaking. "Hello, dear," an older woman's calm voice said gently. "This is Eleanor Whitmore. We met briefly at your mother's birthday dinner last night." Emma immediately remembered the elegant elderly woman who had silently watched the family arguments. "Oh yes, hello. I hope I'm not disturbing you," Eleanor continued kindly. "I was wondering if you'd join me for lunch tomorrow afternoon. There's something important I'd like to discuss." Emma frowned slightly, confused. "With me?" "Yes, dear, with you." The next afternoon, Emma drove nervously to the address Eleanor had given her. She nearly missed the entrance because the estate looked more like a private museum than a home. Tall iron gates opened toward a beautiful stone mansion surrounded by rose gardens and enormous oak trees. Emma parked carefully, suddenly feeling embarrassed by her old car. Before she could knock, the front door opened. Eleanor smiled warmly. "You came." Inside, the home felt elegant but peaceful. Antique paintings covered the walls while sunlight poured through massive windows. A long dining table had been prepared with tea, sandwiches, and fresh flowers. "You don't have to be nervous," Eleanor said gently, noticing Emma's discomfort. "I invited you because I wanted to talk privately." Emma sat quietly across from her. For a moment, Eleanor simply studied her with soft eyes. "You look exactly like your grandmother," she said finally. Emma's throat tightened. "I miss her every day." "So do I." Eleanor smiled sadly. "Rose was my closest friend for 52 years. Emma looked down at her hands. "I didn't realize you two were so close. We were practically sisters." Eleanor paused before continuing carefully. "And because of that, I remember many things your family seems to have forgotten." Emma looked up in confusion. Eleanor folded her hands together. "Last night broke my heart, listening to them mock you so casually." She shook her head slowly. "Your grandmother would have been devastated." Emma forced a weak smile. "They didn't mean anything by it." "Yes, they did." The directness of Eleanor's voice stunned her into silence. For several seconds, only the ticking grandfather clock filled the room. Then Eleanor spoke again. "When Rose became sick, do you remember who stayed with her at night?" Emma blinked. "I did." "Yes." Eleanor nodded. "You did?" Pain flickered behind Eleanor's eyes as memories returned. "Your brother visited twice in 6 months. Vanessa only came when photos were being taken for social media. Your mother complained constantly about how exhausting illness was." Eleanor leaned forward softly. "But you were there every single day." Emma felt emotion rise in her chest. "I just loved her," she whispered. Eleanor smiled sadly. "I know." She stood slowly and walked toward a nearby cabinet. After opening a drawer, she pulled out a small folded letter. "She asked me to keep this." Emma stared at the paper with trembling hands. "It was written 3 weeks before she passed away." Eleanor explained softly. With shaking fingers, Emma unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakably her grandmother's. "Emma has the gentlest heart in this family." Tears instantly blurred her vision. "One day, people will realize kindness matters more than status." Emma pressed her lips together, struggling not to cry. Eleanor sat beside her gently. "Your family sees success as money, appearances, and titles," she said quietly. "But I spent my entire life building businesses, And I can promise you something very few people learn. Emma looked up tearfully. Character is far more valuable. Then Eleanor reached into her purse and handed Emma a business card. I run the Whitmore Foundation, she explained, and I believe someone like you belongs there. Emma stared at her in shock. You listened when others ignored people. Eleanor continued warmly. You cared when nobody was watching. That kind of person is rare. For the first time in years, someone wasn't treating Emma like a disappointment. For the first time in years, someone truly saw her worth. 1 year later, Emma Carter stood confidently behind a podium inside one of the city's largest charity halls while cameras flashed around her. A giant banner behind the stage read, Whitmore Foundation Annual Care Initiative. The same woman her family once mocked for changing diapers was now being honored for transforming elderly care programs across the state. But success had not changed Emma. She still spoke gently to receptionists, still remembered employees' birthdays, and still spent time visiting nursing homes personally instead of hiding inside an office. Eleanor Whitmore often said that Emma's kindness was the reason the foundation had grown faster than ever before. People trusted her, and for the first time in her life, Emma had begun trusting herself too. Beautiful speech, Eleanor whispered proudly as Emma stepped away from the podium. Emma smiled softly. I was terrified. You hide it well. Across the ballroom, reporters gathered around local politicians and wealthy donors, but many of them kept glancing toward Emma. Her story had spread quickly through newspapers and television interviews. People admired the quiet caregiver who rose through compassion instead of arrogance. Unfortunately, her family noticed the attention too. Vanessa noticed first. One afternoon, nearly 8 months after the birthday dinner humiliation, Emma received a sudden text message from her sister. Lunch tomorrow? Miss you? Emma stared at the screen in disbelief. Vanessa had ignored her for almost half a year. Curious, Emma agreed to meet her at an expensive rooftop cafe downtown. The moment she arrived, she immediately understood why Vanessa suddenly cared again. Her sister was live streaming. There she is, Vanessa announced dramatically to her phone camera. My amazing sister Emma from the Whitmore Foundation. Emma almost laughed at the performance. Throughout lunch, Vanessa acted unusually sweet, constantly mentioning Emma's charity work loud enough for nearby tables to hear. You've become so inspiring, Vanessa said with fake admiration. Honestly, I always knew you'd succeed. Emma nearly choked on her coffee. Always knew. This was the same woman who once called her life depressing in front of an entire restaurant. But Emma stayed polite. Meanwhile, Jason's behavior became even stranger. After losing several wealthy legal clients, he suddenly began calling Emma regularly. Hey sis, he said awkwardly during one conversation. Your foundation works with a lot of important people, right? Emma immediately understood. You want connections? Jason laughed nervously. I mean, networking helps everyone. The painful part wasn't their jealousy. The painful part was realizing none of them truly regretted hurting her. They simply respected her now because wealthy people respected her first. One evening, Eleanor invited Emma into her office overlooking the city skyline. There's something I've been planning, Eleanor said calmly. Emma sat across from her desk. That sentence usually scares me. Eleanor laughed softly before sliding an elegant black invitation across the table. The Whitmore Foundation was hosting its annual gala, the biggest charity event of the year. Politicians, business owners, journalists, and celebrities would all attend. I want to honor you publicly, Eleanor explained. Emma looked uncomfortable immediately. That's not necessary. Yes, it is. A week later, the Carter family received invitations. Vanessa nearly exploded with excitement. This gala is huge. She told their mother over the phone. Do you know how many important people will be there? Jason was equally eager. This could be good for my career. The night of the gala arrived with sparkling lights, luxury cars, and reporters crowding outside the Grand Hotel ballroom. Emma wore a simple emerald gown Eleanor personally chose for her. You look elegant, Eleanor told her warmly. Inside, the Carter family suddenly acted completely different around Emma. Vanessa hugged her dramatically in front of guests. There's my successful sister. Jason proudly introduced himself to donors as Emma's brother. Even their mother smiled constantly, pretending years of criticism had never happened. Emma noticed every performance silently. Halfway through the evening, Eleanor stepped onto the stage for her keynote speech. The ballroom slowly quieted. This year, Eleanor began gracefully. Our foundation grew because of one extraordinary woman. Applause filled the room as Emma looked embarrassed. Then Eleanor's expression turned serious. A year ago, I attended a birthday dinner where I watched this same woman be humiliated by her own family. The room fell silent instantly. Emma's stomach dropped. Across the ballroom, Vanessa's smile disappeared completely. Eleanor continued calmly, her voice sharp with truth. I listened as people mocked Emma's career, her income, and even a heartfelt handmade gift. She paused carefully. Yet the entire evening she remained kind. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, then came the final blow. What shocked me most, Eleanor said firmly, was knowing Emma had been the only family member who truly cared for her grandmother during her final illness. Jason looked frozen. Vanessa stared at the floor. Their mother's face turned pale with embarrassment. Eleanor looked directly toward them. Success did not make Emma valuable, she said. She was valuable long before any of you noticed. The ballroom remained painfully silent after Eleanor Whitmore stepped away from the microphone. For several seconds, nobody moved. The elegant music had stopped. Crystal glasses sat untouched on tables while whispers quietly spread across the room. Guests exchanged awkward glances, many turning toward the Carter family with expressions that ranged from shock to disappointment. Emma stood frozen near the stage, heart pounding. She had never imagined Eleanor would reveal the truth so publicly. Across the ballroom, Vanessa looked like she wanted to disappear entirely. Her confident smile had vanished, replaced by panic. Jason stared stiffly at the floor, jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. Their mother sat motionless, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Meanwhile, guests slowly approached Emma. You're incredible, one woman said warmly. I had no idea you went through all of that. Another whispered sympathetically. Several business leaders praised her kindness and dedication. Elderly residents supported by the foundation thanked her personally. Instead of pity, people looked at Emma with respect. Real respect, not because of money, not because of appearances. Because of who she was. Near the dessert table, Emma overheard whispers floating through the crowd. Imagine humiliating someone like that. She cared for her grandmother alone, that poor woman. For once, the embarrassment belonged to someone else. The Carter family left early. Nobody stopped them. The following weeks brought consequences none of them expected. Vanessa's carefully crafted social reputation began falling apart almost immediately. Friends who once admired her glamorous image started quietly distancing themselves. Word about Eleanor's speech spread fast among local circles, and suddenly people viewed Vanessa differently. At charity events, conversations became awkward. So Emma really took care of your grandmother alone, someone asked casually during brunch. Vanessa never knew how to answer. Jason faced problems too. One longtime client mentioned Emma during a meeting. She seems grounded. The man said thoughtfully, family matters tell you a lot about character. Jason forced an uncomfortable smile. Soon afterward, the client moved his business elsewhere. Even their mother changed. The woman who once compared her children constantly now seemed strangely quieter. She stopped bragging about success and wealth during family conversations. Instead, guilt seemed to follow her everywhere. Meanwhile, Emma's world continued growing. Under Eleanor's mentorship, the Whitmore Foundation expanded into multiple cities, creating better support systems for elderly patients and struggling caregivers. Emma personally launched programs offering emotional support for lonely seniors abandoned by relatives. Ironically, her painful experiences helped her understand forgotten people better. One rainy afternoon, Emma sat inside her office reviewing paperwork when the receptionist knocked softly. "There's someone here to see you." Emma looked up. Her mother stood nervously in the doorway. She looked older somehow. Smaller, gone was the polished confidence Emma remembered. Instead, uncertainty filled her tired expression. "Can we talk?" her mother asked quietly. Emma hesitated before nodding. They sat near the office windows overlooking the city. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then her mother exhaled shakily, "I owe you an apology." Emma blinked in surprise. Her mother looked down at trembling hands. "I spent years praising success I could see," she admitted quietly. "Money, careers, appearances, I thought those things mattered most." Tears gathered slowly in her eyes. "And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you." Emma said nothing, because deep down she had waited years to hear those words. "You were always kind," her mother whispered painfully. "You loved people without expecting anything back, and I treated that like weakness." She wiped her eyes. "Your grandmother would have been ashamed of me." The sentence hurt more than Emma expected, not because it felt cruel. Because it felt true. Emma looked out the window quietly. Years of humiliation lived inside her, birthday jokes, cruel comparisons, dismissive comments, lonely holidays. Forgiveness wouldn't erase that pain, but carrying bitterness forever would only wound her more. Finally, Emma spoke softly. "I forgive you." Her mother looked stunned. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting." Emma continued calmly. "Things have to change." Her mother nodded immediately, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I understand." Weeks later, another family gathering took place. Only this time, everything felt different. Nobody mocked Emma's work. Nobody laughed at her clothes or life choices. When she spoke, people listened carefully. And quietly seated beside her sat Eleanor Whitmore, smiling knowingly. Because in the end, Emma's sweetest revenge wasn't wealth. It wasn't status. It wasn't public embarrassment. The sweetest revenge was becoming impossible to underestimate.